Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. In this video I wanted to give you an up-close look at the desert mesa boards that I made. The customer requested both a large mesa, which is on a 20 by 20 board, as well as the normal, behind me, 10 by 20 mesa board as well. And in these boards I've decided to create some new vegetation to accompany them. Thinking about some of the pictures that I looked at for desert terrain. There were a lot of sort of scrubby, dead or dormant, grayish scrub, if you will. So I've developed a new piece to add to these and added a few other elements to them as well. So let's take a closer look and I can show you some of those details. So here you can see the 10 by 20 mesa board. And you'll notice that I took advantage of this piece to add in quite a bit more vegetation to it than I did on some of the other boards. Partly because this piece, because of its large, raised section, is going to offer some protection for the pieces around it during packing, which is often a concern, as I want to make sure that anything I add to it is going to travel safely during shipping. But also, I tend to think of these pieces as perhaps being a little bit more, I don't know, shielding from wind and the sun, something like that. So I often take advantage of that to put a little extra vegetation around them, and it also kind of brings a little life to them as well. So one of the challenges with the 10 by 20 mesa in particular is I really want to have a nice talus slope from it. And in fact, on this set, I actually took the talus slope an extra step further by building it up and then actually adding some sand before I sealed it so that it's cascading down, which produces, I think, a much more realistic talus slope than the other pieces that I've done in the past. Much like the river set, I have gone in and shaded the sides of it just to darken it just a little bit, to set it off a little bit from the soil colors that surround it. In the past, with the Martian colored set, I've really basically just left it as the base colors of the Martian, and it tends to come out a little bit darker in any case because the base color for the Martian set is so dark. But in this case, because the entire board is a relatively bright color scheme, I had to go back in and just darken this up just a little bit to give it a small amount of contrast. The modular board, because it's only 10 inches wide, I try to preserve the maximum amount of size that I can fit a mesa onto this board. So it is a little bit, tight in these edges, which can shift a little bit on the appearance of the vegetation and how much I can put in. But I try to keep it fairly irregular around it to give it a little bit more of a natural feel. So let's go in a little bit closer and I'll show you some of the vegetation in detail. So this gives you a nice up-close view of the talus slope as well as the vegetation that I've added. I decided to use as the dominant theme the buffalo grass, this autumn-colored, I don't know, to me it looks deserty, buffalo grass, which I think is a very nice dead sort of color to work with a desert color scheme, and added in, some different sizes scattered throughout to give it a little bit more of a natural feel. Then I decided that to create some kind of a desert scrub, I actually went and created some of these little brambly tufts, bushes, whatever you want to call them, tumbleweeds of a sort. And, actually I planned on painting them a little bit differently than they came out, but I think in the end I quite like it. Looking at some of the photos of other desert terrain, I did notice some of the pieces had quite a gray cast to some of the dead vegetation, so I decided to leave them as is. And then lastly, I did notice in some of the photos, that there were some scrubby trees, barely eking out an existence amongst the other vegetation. So I decided to take an opportunity and build a couple, very, very small trees. This is only about 1.25 inches, maybe in height, something like that, to give it just a little variation, a little pop. I kind of mixed on them. I like them, but I think I really need to be sparing in their use. So there's only a few of them scattered around on a couple of the boards. And here's another look at the other side of the board to give you a sense of, you know, these little scrubby trees and what they look like, and another look at some of the gray tumbleweeds, I guess that's what I'll call them, as well as another angle on the talus slope. And as I said before, I really like how this came out and will definitely be the trendsetter for future mesas down the road. And here is the large mesa on the 10 by 20 board, and this is, you know, provides a fantastic opportunity to have a really substantial piece on the table. The mesa itself spans, you know, probably 17 by 17, so there's a lot of space on top to put, you know, large vehicles, flyers, blocks of troops, whatever game system you're playing. And it also gives me a little more creativity in some of the cuts that are installed on the sides of the mesa, so you're going to see variations in each one that I make, and depending on my whim, sometimes I drop them a little low, sometimes I keep them up high. There's always going to be that variation. And again, you can see around the edge a bit more of that scattering of that vegetation, but we should probably look at it from a little bit more of a model's eye view. So here you can get a little bit more of a close-up perspective on the side of the mesa, the talus slope around it, and again some of that vegetation that I've been carrying through. I picked, you know, just about 4, you know, 5-ish plants to use throughout the set in general, to try to limit the amount of diversity and to bring it to a little bit more of a subdued look. Again, you know, as I mentioned in the very first video, I'm not trying to go for a lush look as much as to capture some of that scrubby feel that a lot of desert terrain has. One thing I should point out, which probably isn't going to be evident to the casual observer, is that when I initially painted the talus slope for this, I just painted it the way I painted the soil, and it really kind of made these rocks just disappear. They didn't really have a lot of contrast and stand out. So much as I did with the side of the mesa, I actually went in and picked out all these individual stones all the way around the sides and gave them a wash, and then re-highlighted them so that they'd have a bit of a stronger contrast. And while it's a subtle effect, it made a marked improvement in the overall look. So it's the kind of thing that most people probably wouldn't notice, but without that extra work, it really loses a lot of the pop at the base of the piece. And I also believe that since I had shaded this a bit darker, that we have a more of a, you know, a different look to the rocks themselves, or the substrate that the mesa is eroding from, and that I wanted that darker feel to come across in some of the rocks. Now the shading is fairly subtle, but it definitely helps to blend those larger chunks of material in with the mesa itself. So anyway, that gives you a closer look at the large mesa and gives you a sense of the sort of style with which I did it as an overview. Of course, with a few pieces around the top, just to give the top a little bit of a breakup. So that gives you a look at the new mesa boards, and you know, myself just checking back on some of the old mesa pictures I have up. I think you'll notice a little improvement in the talus slope there, and of course it gives you a different look for a different style as well. And also remember, you know, if you're interested in ever purchasing anything like this, that it can also be finished in the verdant or the green color scheme, and of course the Martian scheme and whatnot. Very malleable in terms of adapting these to different kinds of environments. Stay tuned. I will be continuing this video series with the next set of boards in the desert board set that I've recently completed. If you're new to the channel, or if you've just dropped in on this video through the web store, you might want to go back in the YouTube videos to see the entire set laid out and give you a little sense of where we're going along in this video journey. So keep your eye on the channel. I will be back soon, and as always, please feel free to leave questions and comments down below, and I will talk to you soon.